Debbie Hayton was a married man with 3 children before undergoing gender reassignment surgery in 2016. Initially a trans activist, Debbie began to question the gender identity orthodoxy and has therefore been targeted for criticism by the trans community. And now Debbie's written a memoir. There it is on the screen, Transexual Apostate, My Journey Back to Reality. And I'm delighted to say that Debbie Hayton joins me now. Welcome to the show. And congratulations on the book. A fantastic review in The Telegraph the other day. It's all going very well, isn't it? The book is called Transsexual Apostate. Why not transgender apostate? That's the word that most people use, isn't it?
I think it is, but transsexual links with sex, and we know what sex is. Sex is real, sex is meaningful. I really don't know what gender means.
Well, I think from my understanding, many people say that they have an innate gendered identity. Helen Joyce compares it to like a sexed soul, and that there are people who say that that is just misaligned with their body. Do you think they're just wrong about that? I think
the idea of gender identity is wrong, and I explain that in the book. I go through what gender identity is, where it came from. It was just this idea that somebody had, and I point out that I can be transsexual, I can go through gender reassignment surgery, and I can explain all that without a gender identity. And if I don't need a gender identity, nobody needs one.
Because a lot of people talk about trans, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what exactly does that mean. And a lot of people, I think, are thinking in terms of transsexual, as in someone who has to go through this procedure for whatever reason in order to be comfortable in life. And a lot of people have sympathy with those kinds of people. But now, because of self-identification, the meanings become blurred.
Well, yes, we had this idea that a transsexual was somebody who went through a meaningful transition, and that meant that they were routinely perceived to be a member of the opposite sex. They looked like a member of the opposite sex, more often taken for a member of the opposite sex. But then this idea of self-ID came along, which said that any man can self-declare himself to be a woman, and that's fine. And one of the reasons I got into the activism was partly the impact it has on women's rights, which we can see, and the impact it's having on children, which is desperate, but also what the impact it has on transsexuals.
Yeah, well, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I've heard you say before that you think a lot of this activism has been really bad for trans people.
Well, it has. We were in a situation about 7-8 years ago when transsexuals could transition. They could take hormone therapy, go through surgery, and then be accepted in the same way that members of the opposite sex are accepted. But that's something major, is that? That's massive, is that, to ask people to do that. But people did.
Yes.
And then along come these campaigners saying, oh, well, we should just open this up to everybody. Yes. Anybody can self-declare to be a member of the opposite sex, and that's fine. And then the pushback which we have seen in recent years and recent months it was so obvious this was going to happen. I could see it happening in 2016.
Yes.
And I wrote about it in the book.
So you identify as trans, but you will admit that you are biologically male?
Well, yeah, and I have that T-shirt, Trans Women and Men Get Over It, you know, which caused a bit of fuss a few years ago.
I'm sure it did, yeah, absolutely. It's in your book, of course, you talk about the transitional process. This is you're opening up a great deal, you're revealing an awful lot. Isn't it quite difficult to write something like that, so personal?
It was, and my editor said he couldn't read it without crossing his legs that bit.
OK.
So, yes, it was, but And it's things that, when I was growing up, there was things I've said about my childhood in the book, which I thought I would never, ever be able to admit to anybody.
Yeah.
But if you don't say these things, then things are just lost. And I think it's important to actually explain what it feels like to go through this.
Because your story is very unique insofar as you say, you're speaking openly about something that very few people do. And one of the things that you write about is ortogynephilia. Do you want to explain what that is and how that relates to you?
Well, ortogynephilia is defined as being sexually and romantically attracted to your own body. Men can be attracted to all sorts of things.
I know.
Men can be attracted to women's bodies, they can be attracted to men's bodies, they can be attracted to inanimate objects. Some of us are attracted to our own bodies. But because we're heterosexual, we're attracted to female traits. So you're sexually and romantically attracted to a lamentably male body. And that's the circle that can't be squared.
That's very interesting because we don't hear about this very much. How common do you think this is among biological males who identify as females?
Well, how common are these feelings? There was a survey done by Ken Zucker and a Swedish survey a few years ago which suggested that around 2 to 3% of men had had at least one cross-dressing fantasy.
Right.
You know, this isn't uncommon.
Yes.
Agoniants will say that this is a common theme. Among male-to-female transsexuals, it's been said probably most.
Yes.
Probably most. Otherwise, you've got to say, why do people do this? Why do people go through all this surgery, this hormone, turn their lives upside down?
Yes.
And the explanation which I'm coming up with, it's down to the male sex drive, the most powerful force known to man.
And of course, the male sex drive is one of the reasons why so many women are concerned about men identifying into their spaces. I mean, how important do you think that is for women to have their own spaces?
I think it's vital. I think women should be able to say this space is for biological women, and we should respect that.
So what toilets would you use, for instance?
I tend to find out where the single-use cubicles are.
Yes.
GB News is great for me.
I know we're very woke here. We have
I know not everybody appreciates those toilets.
I'm fully aware of that as well, yes.
But if there's coffee shops in town, I know which coffee shops have got the single-use toilet, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
So it's not difficult. It's not difficult to make this work.
Yes.
But women should expect to have biological spaces and those not to be compromised.
Yes, because there's been a lot of chat online since the book was announced about a teachers' union safeguarding policy that you were involved with drafting, and the complaint seems to relate to the idea of biological males using women's toilets. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think this goes back about 7 years when my union was developing some guidance, and I assisted with that, and my case study's in there.
Yes.
So I assisted with things. I wrote some things. I commented on other things, and then it went off, and then it was published. But I'm just a member of that union, so it's inappropriate for me to comment on my own union's publications.
What about the issue of pronouns? I mean, a lot of feminists are concerned about the idea that we're all meant to announce our pronouns now, but not just feminists. I think generally it's seen as an odd thing. Where do you stand on the pronoun issue?
Pronouns belong to the person using them, and they're a descriptive tool to describe somebody. So if I was describing you, I would say he, because that's what people understand. When people think he, it matches with you. But pronouns are there to be used by the person using them, not the person being described. So I'm not somebody who would wear a pronoun badge that said my pronouns are he, him, she, her, whatever. My pronouns are I, me. That's my pronouns.
So how do you feel when people refer to you as he?
It doesn't bother me at all. If they're the pronouns people use for me, that's fine. Human beings, these are pronouns we use for human beings, and don't care too much for it. I don't like that.
No.
But he, she, it doesn't bother me at all. But this compulsion of language is going on, and it's actually now coming from the other side, demanding that I announce that my pronouns are he, him. Well, I've never gone out and demanded that my pronouns are she, her. So I'm not going to do this either.
Very interesting. And I've spoken on this show quite a lot about the way in which when you have one of those appalling crimes where a trans-identified male commits a rape or a sexual abuse of a child or something, and the media will call this person a woman and say she and her when they don't need to do that. And it does confuse the issue, I think. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. A rapist is a man. Only men have the tools to commit rape.
Yes.
And I think it just confuses the issue. Pronouns should be there to help, not confuse.
And, of course, most people do use pronouns according to biological sex. That's how it's used.
Yeah, and because we use pronouns according to how we perceive people, and we tend to perceive their biological sex. We're really good as human beings in perceiving biological sex.
Yes, of course. So in the book, you go right back to childhood, and you're really opening up, and you're telling us your whole life story. Is there when did you first sort of have this inkling about yourself that you were, well, I don't want to say the word different, but I think unusual is a fair term, isn't it?
Unusual, yes. The first example I gave was when I was learning to count. And there was the word 80, and I knew I was going to get there because somebody was teaching me to count. And just like that, it was like tights, which was a clothing that girls wore, and I didn't. And I remember it cutting through me at the time, and it's one of those early memories that stuck with me. And it's helpful because it just tells me that this goes way back. This is baked in, these ideas.
Yeah, and you use this metaphor of keeping a beach ball underwater and it keep, coming back to the surface. So it's something that's in you and it's something that compels you and drives you. But you can't repress it forever, I suppose, is the point.
Well, I think possibly I could have done. I'd become very good at repressing this, keeping this down and out of view. But it was the dawn of the internet. This is the problem.
Yes.
When you start coming across on the internet about other people like me who are transitioning.
Yes.
And the feeling that if they can do this thing I've always wanted to do but think it's not for me, if they can do this, then I want to do this too. And that feeling of jealousy and envy was what pushed me over the edge.
But when you're talking about the origin of these feelings when it regards yourself, this mustn't make you very popular with trans people who are talking about how they have a gender identity. This is a thing that exists. And they would say that you are denying their existence. That's the kind of language we're
I'm denying gender identity. I think it's nonsense. But it's much easier to go out and insist that I'm a woman who's had the misfortune of being born in a male body. That's an easy story to sell. To say that I'm a man who happens to be sexually attracted to my own body, so I changed it to make it consistent with what I'm sexually attracted to. That's harder to sell to the public.
So what about when it comes to schools, for instance? You're a teacher, so and you're a science teacher, so presumably biology is hugely important.
Yeah.
But we have seen examples of gender identity ideology being taught to children, not just that it's a theory, but that it's an absolute fact. Does that put you, as a teacher who doesn't believe in gender identity, in any kind of disadvantage?
Well, I'm a physics teacher, I'm a science teacher,
yes.
So my job is to teach electrical circuits, Newton's laws of motions, and I try to stick with that.
Yes, but if you were asked, what would you do? If you were asked about gender identity by a school kid? I often think about this because I used to be a school teacher. Right.
I would say something like, well, let's have a look at the policy here which we're to talk about and refer back to that. I do have a job to do. I'm a teacher working in school under the direction of a head teacher. OK. Well, when is the book out? I think it's quite soon, isn't it? The book is out on Thursday.
That's very exciting. So people can pre-order it?
They can pre-order now from all the usual places.
Yes. Well, Debbie, thank you ever so much for writing the book, and thank you ever so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you.